और जीवन के सभी।
Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. A preliminary investigation into last month's Air India crash says both fuel control switches were moved to cut-off position, which turns off the engines. Cockpit audio shows the pilots were confused, with one asking the other why they did it, but both denied taking that step that led to the deadly crash, killing 260 people. President Donald Trump visits Texas flood-stricken Hill County, praising state and federal efforts after flash floods killed at least 120 people, many of them children. Trump said Governor Greg Abbott and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem did an incredible job despite ongoing questions over how the disaster was handled. A Palestinian American from Tampa, Florida, was beaten to death by Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank, according to his family and rights groups. The victim was visiting family in Palestine when he was attacked. Another Palestinian was also fatally shot during the incident, the health ministry said. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov arrived in North Korea for a visit reported by state media as part of deepening ties between the two countries. His trip includes a meeting with North Korea's foreign minister and comes right after Lavrov attended the ASEAN summit in Malaysia. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese will visit China this weekend to meet President Xi Jinping and push stronger trade and security talks. Albanese says his 6-day trip signals cooperation despite differences, as China remains Canberra's biggest trading partner. An Israeli drone strike hit a car in southern Lebanon, killing one man accused by Israel of helping smuggle weapons from Iran. The Lebanese health ministry confirmed 1 dead and 5 wounded in the attack, which comes despite a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah since November. The UN Rights Office says it's recorded at least 798 killings in just 6 weeks at aid points and convoys in Gaza, including those run by the US and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The GHF disputes the UN figures, denying deadly incidents at its sites, while Israel's army says it's reviewing recent mass casualty incidents. 4 migrants have died and about 20 others are missing after a wooden migrant boat capsized off the Dominican Republic while heading for Puerto Rico. Authorities said 17 people were rescued from the unsafe vessel as illegal migration by Yola boats has risen in recent years. Now, our top story today, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner flying from Ahmedabad to London crashed shortly after takeoff on June the 12th, killing 275 people, making it the world's deadliest aviation disaster in over a decade. On June the 13th, India's Aircraft Incident Investigation Bureau launched a full probe supported by the US National Transportation Safety Board. Both black boxes located in the jet's front and rear were recovered and flown to Delhi for analysis. Investigators were able to extract data from the forward unit, providing crucial clues about what happened in the final moments. The Air Accidents Investigation Branch has now released a preliminary report into the crash. Let's take a deeper look into this. Now let's have a look at the further details of what this report says. As we can see by the information released today, engine 1 and 2 fuel cutoff switches were moved to immediately cut off after takeoff, just after reaching 180 knots indicated airspeed. Both engines' fuel cutoff switches transitioned from run to cutoff. This action shut off fuel supply to the engines and led to a rapid loss of thrust. This is highly unusual and not part of any standard takeoff procedure. Investigators are now focused on whether this was caused by a mechanical fault, pilot error, or electrical system anomaly. Now we move on to some more information. We have communications between the pilots now. Pilot-to-pilot confusion was captured on the voice recorder, the cockpit, in the cockpit, which captured a moment where one pilot asked, quote, "Why did you cut off?" And the other replied, "I did not do so." This exchange points to miscommunication or a potential inadvertent system input, possibly by accident or malfunction. We cannot confirm this as of yet. Neither pilot claimed responsibility for this action. Now, the Ram air turbine deployed for emergency power as both engines lost thrust and the plane began descending. The Ram air turbine was automatically deployed. This is a small propeller-driven turbine which generates electricity, hydraulic and electrical power to keep vital systems like flight controls functioning when both engines fail. Relight attempts were made. Only one engine was partially recovered. The pilots tried to relight both engines by quickly switching the fuel cutoff switches back to run. Engine 1 showed signs of recovery as its core deceleration reversed and exhaust gas temperatures rose, indicating combustion. Engine 2, however, failed to stabilize and continued decelerating despite repeated fuel reintroduction. Thrust levers found at idle, but data shows takeoff thrust was engaged. Post-crash investigations found the thrust levers in the cockpit at the idle position. However, the flight data recorder indicated that takeoff thrust had been engaged, suggesting the engines failed to respond properly, likely due to fuel starvation, not pilot input error. However, we cannot confirm or deny these claims, as this is a preliminary report, as we said. Flap handle position was consistent with normal takeoff. The flap handle assembly used to control wing flaps for lift during takeoff was found in a standard takeoff configuration. This indicates that takeoff was initiated correctly, ruling out flap configuration as a contributing factor to this crash. Now, the fuel sample tested was clean with no contamination detected. Investigators tested fuel from the aircraft and the refueling source. However, no contamination was found, confirming that fuel quality was not a factor in the engine failures. This is the findings from this report that was just released today. No recommendations have been issued to Boeing or GE yet. At this stage, the AAIB has not issued safety recommendations to either Boeing or GE, the engine maker. This implies there's no clear evidence of a design flaw in the 7878 aircraft or the GE Gen X-1B engines, though this could change as more evidence is reviewed. Now, engines were relatively newly installed at the time. The left engine was installed on May the 1st of last year, and the right engine was installed on the 26th of March of 2024. That this suggests that both engines were in their early life cycle and well within operational timelines, minimizing the likelihood of age-related mechanical failure. Now, the next major check was due in December of this year, but the aircraft was not due in for its next major maintenance check until December of 2025, indicating it was well within its scheduled service period and had not missed any major inspections. Now we're going to dive into this in a lot further detail. We're joined by two guests today to discuss this. Vandana Singh, who's an aviation expert, he joins us live from the Indian capital, and we're also joined by Wing Commander S. Sudhara Khan, who's also an aviation expert, joining us from New Delhi. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Vandana, I wanted to start with you. We've obviously just given a lot of information about the details which this report has in it. However, what is it important for the public not to jump to any conclusions, and what can we make from this report so far? Just briefly.
Firstly, thank you for having me on your show.
Of course.
As we just spoke, this is the preliminary report that's come out. What is important that it's come out on time, within a month's time that was promised. The preliminary report is out, and the initial findings are already coming in. It is also clear that the pilot 1 is asking pilot 2, or is it the pilot 2 asking the pilot 1, who has cut off the fuel switch, and it's a negative from the other side. So this is also clear that that has not been tampered with. So I don't really see a pilot error over here. Of course, a lot of other factors have already been taken out, be it fuel contamination, be it bird strike, be it XYZ. But a point that I have always been talking to various channels and to yourself also right from the beginning, that I see that the FedEx needs to be examined, which is the full authority digital engine control operating system of the 787 Dreamliner needs to be examined and investigated into full detail, because that faulty miscommand from that can lead to a dual engine failure. And that's the reason why suddenly there was no power, there was no thrust, there was no nothing, and the pilots themselves were baffled. So was it the faulty sensors? What happened to the switches? All of this is something that one has to get into the bottom of it. And none of the stakeholders can be spared out right now, because all the stakeholders are in. There is a response that has to be given to all the human lives that have been lost.
Yes.
It's a global tragedy. It's a national tragedy. And for a Dreamliner 787-, it's the first major tragedy that's happened of this aircraft. So therefore, a lot of questions need to be answered over here. And it is pertinent to see that there was an advisory that was taken out on December 17th, 2018 regarding these switches. And 7 years hence, why there was no seriousness given to that? Why were the checks not done in a proper manner? Why was it not looked into? These are the points that one has to really go into, because this has to be taken very seriously. At the end of it, it's a human life at stake, and so many lives are already gone. So I do hope that as we do go deeper into the investigation and the findings start coming out, that they will examine the FedEx, they will examine the electrical software malfunction glitch that could have triggered this. I think all of these factors need to be looked into before coming to a conclusion. Right now, only the first findings are in.
Of course.
Over to you.
Thank you very much. We're also joined by Wing Commander Sudhara Khan, who joins us from New Delhi as well. Wing Commander, thank you very much for joining us on the program. As we've already been told, this is the preliminary report, so it's very important not to jump to any conclusions here. However, what do you make of this report, and what information are we still waiting for?
Let me quickly tell you the broad aspects of what has come out in the report. So before, on the day when the accident happened, we talked about 3 plausible reasons as to why this could have happened. One is, of course, the main reason being, why did the engine lose thrust? Because something has happened to the engine which could potentially be explained by a bird strike. Now today, that has been taken out. right? So there are two more, there are two other reasons now that comes into the mind, which is action within the cockpit by one of the pilots or both the pilots, number one. Or two is about a software electromagnetical mechanical failure because of which this happened. Now, if you look at the sequence of action from the takeoff, which is T0, to the time which is around 32 seconds from then on, that's the point of interest, because 15 seconds before, everything was perfect. The aircraft has attained a maximum speed of around 170 odd knots, which is what enabled the aircraft to take off. So till that time, everything was perfect. Now, 3 to 4 seconds into the takeoff, one pilot suddenly sees that the fuel cutoff switches have been flipped to cutoff state from the run state. Now, see, mind you, there are two engines and there are two independent fuel cutoff switches. Now, it's very highly unlikely that an error happens in both the switches at the same time, because the aviation design, because being an aeronautical engineer, I can tell you that we don't operate on the philosophy of a single point of failure, because there is no single command which controls both the switches. These are independent channels which is acting in redundancy, so that even if it happens due to some reason, there is no single point of failure in such a design, because that is vetted, and that's why this aircraft has been absolutely incident-free for the last 10 plus years. So that's point number one that you need to keep into mind. So now we have a state wherein both the switches have gone from run to cutoff. This is where, by the time it has reached a maximum altitude of just about 625 feet, I have to put another angle to this, because this change in state has just happened at a very critical time. This is to be noted. Keep this in mind, because whatever has happened, somebody knew that this is the time where the aircraft is at its peak of its vulnerability. Had it happened 15 seconds later or a minute later, the aircraft would have achieved a certain height, wherein even if both the engines would have failed, the aircraft could have glided and landed. So which means somebody didn't want that to happen. Somebody, in the sense, it could be a machine, it could be a human, right? Let's keep it at that. The second point is when the pilot, there is a clear evidence which says that one pilot asked the other pilot as to who flipped this, and the other pilot responded by saying no. Now, can I take this statement at face value? No, I will not take, because today there are lives of 200 plus people. There is a major accident that has happened. It could be an instantaneous, spontaneous reaction, so we will keep it by the side. But this is again very important, that one pilot has, so it is only one pilot who is absolutely clear, because he's asked this question, because if you had done it, you wouldn't have asked. The third point is, because this has happened and the other pilot immediately has flipped it, he has not gone to fight, but he has just tried to, rescue the situation. So the switches have been flipped, and one engine has been half relit and the other didn't relight, which means that the required thrust at that level for the kind of payload that it was carrying, it was not able to achieve, and therefore it was of no consequence, and then it started losing height at about 900 to 1,000 feet per minute. And then since it was at around 625 odd feet, there was no way that that flight could have survived. So what we know is the change of switches. Now, can there be a software, electromagnetic or a mechanical failure? The answer is 99% no. Why? Because it is operated by a physical, a lever operated, because this is the only component wherein Boeing has not automized it. It is very clear. The ICAS and the FedEx has not stepped in, because it has not been, there is no warning that it is issued. So if ICAS had given a fire warning, then the fuel would have got cut off. There would have been a warning that would have come. Now, if the pilot has intentionally switched off or changed the switch position, then the ICAS wouldn't respond, because the superior element in the cockpit is the pilot's brain. And if the pilot has opted to switch this, the ICAS wouldn't respond. It cannot give an overriding warning over the pilot, because at the end of the day, ICAS stands to lose nothing. That is the philosophy adopted by the designers. So here, this action has happened from the cockpit. Why? Because these levers and both levers, see, one can go off. There can be mechanical failure in one. Now, exactly during a very crucial juncture of 4 seconds, exactly during that period, if we are flipping things, then that calls for, we have to magnify it and then we have to look into this. Now, this is very, very critical because this talks about a conspiracy angle, a sabotage angle from the cockpit. Now, this becomes the primary source because there is no way that the aircraft can respond by itself during that corridor of 4 seconds. If it has happened, say, in the mid-air at a higher elevation, then the pilot has a chance to land back. Because somebody knew very clearly that this is the corridor that I have, if I have to do what I want to do, and this has happened. So this is of very great interest for me, these 4 seconds. No advisory counts here because advisory is only something, it is not a mandatory thing. It is like telling you bought my lock, but then ensure that your door is locked. You can't keep your door open and say my lock didn't work. That's what an advisory is all about, right? So you can't blame Boeing's advisory for this. It is very clear that between that 4 seconds, there is something that has happened. Now, who did it? How did it happen? And why it happened? These are the questions that they need to find answers for in this subsequent part of the investigation. But today, if you ask me what is the pointer is sitting in the cockpit. Now, the answer is yes, I didn't do it. Now, how it happened? Yes, there is a plausible answer. There are other answers which I suspect. There are zero-day vector exploits that we can do, but I will not comment on that because it still is a mechanically operated lever which doesn't have any control whatsoever from any software. Had the systems given the command and this happened, because that would have got recorded in any which way. There is no finding that way. So therefore, because Honeywell, which has manufactured these switches, they've been very clear that you need to take the safety lever off, then you need to push it, and then only does it go from one state to the other state, which means there is a mechanical action which has been involved there. Unless and until that lever also has an electromagnetic control, which is not the case. So that is why I am certain that there is something in the cockpit that has happened. We need to look at that angle. That's all that I can say right now.
Wing Commander Sud Hadakaran, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Your insight is greatly appreciated. Vandana, I wanted to move back to you. We've been told that this is an extremely unusual occurrence. We know why the incident happened. However, the reason why is not yet clear, and we do have to stress that. A possible plane fault, a pilot mistake, or a system glitch that switched both of these fuel switches to cut off. In regards to errors, how unusual is this? And obviously what played a huge factor is how close, how soon after takeoff this incident happened. But how unusual is this incident to occur?
Most, I still maintain that there could be faulty sensors, that something is in the operating system itself that could have caused this glitch. But more will come out when we get to know exactly what happened inside the cockpit. Now coming to how unusual this is, yes, this is unusual, but definitely it can happen. It's not that it cannot happen. One needs to take all angles into consideration, and as I said earlier, all stakeholders need to be accounted for. None can be spared right now. We really need to look deeper into all angles that are coming out. This is just the preliminary report that has come out. More will come out. Do not forget that the incoming aircraft from Delhi to Ahmedabad, the same equipment that flew back, had a similar issue, that there was an electrical software malfunction on that aircraft as well. So what really happened at the Ahmedabad airport was that all corrected before all the green checks and the ticks were done by the pilot. All of that will also come out. So yes, I think we need to dig deeper and more information will be coming out very soon. Over to you.
Indeed, Vandana. This voice recording of one pilot asking, why did you cut it off, and the other saying, I didn't. What does that reveal about the cockpit communication and also possible system errors here?
Well, in my view, right now it is coming out as confusion. Right now, we don't know, was it the captain asking the co-pilot, or was it the co-pilot asking the captain? We really do not know, who was asking whom, but clearly the answer was negative. And I would go with that because I have a gut feeling that the pilots were not there to blame. There is something else behind it. And I'm still going on the electrical software glitch, and that the FedEx needs to be examined, because any faulty sensors, anything, can overwrite it. So yes, we need to dig deeper into this, in my view. Over to you.
Vandana Singh, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Your insight is greatly appreciated, and we will bring you all the information on the Ahmedabad plane crash as it develops and we get more to tell you. We now move over to the United States, where President Donald Trump visited Kerr County, Texas on Friday to defend the federal and state response to the deadly flash floods that killed at least 120 people on July the 4th. Trump praised Texas Governor Greg Abbott and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, calling their actions incredible despite criticism over the slow warning system. The flooding struck with little notice, rapidly swelling the Guadalupe River from 1 feet to 34 feet. Let's take a listen in to what Trump said about the flood aid system.
The search for the missing continues. The people that are doing it are unbelievable people. That you couldn't get better people than this anywhere, Kristi, right? Anywhere in the world, you couldn't get better people. And they're doing the job like I don't think anybody else could, frankly. And I want to thank them. I want to thank all of these great first responders who raced into very grave danger. We have some people that were incredible. The single Coast Guard rescue crew saved an incredible 169 children at Camp Mystic. 169.
Locals, however, expressed frustration with Kerr County's decision not to install an early warning system due to a lack of state funding. Some residents criticised both local and state governments for insufficient investment in disaster prevention. As search teams continue to look for missing people, over 160 remain unaccounted for. Texas lawmakers plan to investigate the disaster and provide relief funding. Though Trump faced questions about his cuts to emergency response programs like FEMA, some local residents defended the overall response, pointing to the region's history of flooding. Here's what Trump said with regards to FEMA.
FEMA has deployed multiple emergency response units, and FEMA has been really headed by some very good people. We have some good people running FEMA. It's about time. We're also taking historic action to ensure that such a nightmare never happens again. We're going to look and see how can a thing like this, they could say it's a 100-year, somebody said it's a 500-year event. It doesn't, we're not going to let a thing like this happen again where it can wreak this kind of devastation.
We're now joined by Jim Rice, who's a professor of international law. He's joins us live from Vigan in the Philippines. Jim, thank you very much for joining us. This tragedy still unfurls with obviously 120 people dead now. The US president has visited the site. How do you analyse the US's response to this tragedy? Over 47 children have been confirmed dead, at least, and with many still missing. Trump has praised the response to this flood. How do you analyse this entire situation that's ongoing in Texas right now?
Thanks for having me on, Thomas. I appreciate the chance to talk about this tragedy. And as you may recall, your viewers may recall, that just after this tragedy occurred, I went on your show and I was very reluctant to make any kind of judgment call about this or point accusations in any direction. But I think at this point, it becomes clear that, first of all, Trump and the director of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Administration, are lying, because we can see this in the fact that shortly after Kristi Noem took control, and again, FEMA has been in the process of being dismantled by the Trump administration, but after she took control, she made an order that any expense more than $100,000 would require her personal signature. And after this tragedy, which demanded immediate emergency action, obviously it had to go to her desk. And it took 3 days for her approval to be granted. And I really think that during that time, lives were lost. But I think that this involves a growing scandal around Kristi Noem. And I'd like to talk about that later.
Jim, obviously this was a rapidly developing situation with the water on July the 4th rising from 1 feet to over 25 feet in the space of 45 minutes. This is obviously unprecedented and obviously an ongoing situation in regards to national disasters in the United States. The Trump administration has labeled this as incredible, as an incredible response. What does this response highlight despite the criticism?
Well, again, I would reiterate my earlier reply that because of Kristi Noem's decision, she created a bureaucracy that made it impossible for FEMA to act immediately as it needed to be done. But in addition to that, these flash floods are not unprecedented in that region or in the United States. This is well known. This could have been avoided, and I believe that the early warning sirens and early warning means of telling people to get out were not followed.
Jim, thank you very much. You are staying with us to discuss further updates. We now move on. The US State Department has begun issuing over 1,350 termination notices, marking the start of a sweeping reorganization under Secretary of State Marco Rubio, one of the most dramatic shakeups in the history of America's diplomatic corps. The move comes just days after the Supreme Court lifted a legal block on the Trump administration's plan to carry out mass layoffs across federal agencies, a plan that could ultimately affect hundreds of thousands of government workers. According to internal emails, more than 1,100 civil service and 246 foreign service employees in domestic roles will be let go. Another 1,600 have already left through a voluntary scheme. Critics, including Democratic senators and the American Foreign Service Association, have slammed the move, calling it a blow to U.S. diplomacy amid global instability. The administration maintains that the reduction is about realignment and not politics. Let's listen in to some stakeholders.
It is very sad. All of my staff was riffed today. And you run the gamut between folks that are having their first child to folks that are the single income in their household, and now that is gone. And folks that were doing good work for the citizens of the United States.
The department would disagree with the need for reform, but arbitrarily laying off people like me and others, irrespective of their performance, is not the right way to do it. Like others impacted by these cuts, I have 2 young kids at home who depend on my salary.
We're once again joined by Jim Rice to discuss this update from the United States. Jim, layoffs have been a huge element in Trump's administration. This, however, comes after a Supreme Court ruling. Do unions Or do Congress now have any remaining tools to slow these layoffs? Or are they a final nail in the coffin for all these people affected?
Thanks for that question, Thomas. I don't think that they do. And even if there were, and I'm sure, of course, there would be legislative means. However, at this point, the Republican Party controls the both houses of Congress, and the Republican Party has basically abdicated all of their authority under the Constitution to Trump. So that's the way it is. But what Trump has done here is essentially been promised in his blueprint called Project 2025, and it's quite clear that they're rolling out Project 2025, which is, in a wider sense, right? What they're doing is they're axing all of these civil service jobs that do really good work in embassies in the foreign service. And as you know, I live in the Philippines, and as an overseas national, we depend upon the State Department, and we depend upon the U.S. Embassy in Manila and other cities to carry out services for Americans overseas. So this is a terrible decision, but essentially what Trump is doing is he's trying to eliminate what has essentially been the civil service and to replace it with either incompetence or loyalists to himself.
Jim, we've never really seen any unprecedented action in regards to this in recent times, in regards to mass layoffs of government workers. Why is this such a popular policy in the Trump administration? And what can we expect from the future of the US government in regard to this?
Again, those are excellent questions. I just go back to one of the earliest actions that the Trump regime, I'm going to call it, carried out, which is the destruction of USAID, which was done under Trump's authority by Elon Musk back in January of 2025. And this decision to destroy or to dismantle USAID has been responsible for thousands of deaths and the waste of tons and tons of U.S. aid that's basically rotting away in warehouses, that it's available to be distributed to needy people all over the world. He's also tearing up all of these excellent programs that's given the U.S. just so much value in terms of soft power overseas. In terms of why is he doing this, I can only guess, but it seems that Trump only, has a very short-term and limited view. In fact, I really couldn't say why they're doing this. It's inconceivable why anyone would do such a thing.
Jim, what message do you think that these layoffs send to America's allies and adversaries at this time of global uncertainty?
Again, thanks for that follow-up. I really appreciate that chance to address this. One of the things that they did was to dismantle the Voice of America, which broadcasts to totalitarian countries such as places like Tibet and Xinjiang in China and other places and Myanmar, where people depend upon the U.S. to get unbiased news. Why is he doing this? I really believe that, in a sense, what Trump is trying to do is just dismantle U.S. soft power abroad, and it's to the advantage of America's adversaries and enemies, and surely to the disadvantage of the United States.
Jim, some people say America is the leader of the free world. However, these terminations to US aid and certain foreign consulates and embassies, some would say this contradicts this. How might this reshaping align with Secretary of State Marco Rubio's broader foreign policy goals?
It's hard to say. You can go back to what the Trump regime has done in in the Ukraine war in terms of, this on again and off again suspension and weakening of the U.S. Support for Ukraine, which is, in an embattled situation, fighting off Russia, which is an aggressor. So as to what other adversaries, for example, in the Indo-Pacific are thinking, obviously this is weakening America's position, weakening America's role, and basically removing the United States as being the so-called leader of the free world.
Yes, and do you think these layoffs for the future, do you think this could they could lead to a loss of institutional memory within the State Department?
Absolutely. Again, if eventually, of course, Trump will be out of office, he won't be in office forever, and eventually there'll be a new president. But the damage that has been done right now, that the Trump regime is carrying out, is definitely going to have a memory, and is definitely going to take decades for these institutions to be able to repair themselves, and it's really a crisis, I believe.
Jim Rice, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Apologies, you are staying with us for our further stories. We stay in the United States next, where a California farm worker has died from injuries sustained a day earlier when U.S. immigration agents raided a cannabis operation and arrested hundreds of workers, according to a farm worker advocacy group. This comes as a federal judge in California ordered the Trump administration to temporarily halt some of its most aggressive tactics in rounding up undocumented immigrants. Dozens of migrant rights activists faced off with federal agents in rural Southern California on Thursday. It was the latest escalation of President Donald Trump's campaign for mass deportations of immigrants in the U.S. illegally. His administration has made conflicting statements about whether immigration agents will target the farm labor workforce, about half of which is unauthorized to work in the United States, according to the government estimates. The Department of Homeland Security said approximately 200 people in the country illegally were arrested in the raid, which targeted 2 locations of the cannabis operation Glass House Farms. Agents also found 10 migrant minors at the farm, according to reports. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Rodney Scott has posted on X that the facility is under investigation for child labor violations. Here's what the United Farm Workers Vice President had to say.
What we know is that one of the workers from the Glass House operation was transported to the hospital. Family informed me that they were in the ICU, and this morning the family confirmed that he indeed passed away. It was a very comprehensive raid that occurred at this operation. It does appear that there was a warrant served.
Jim, the Trump administration's battle against illegal undocumented migrants continues. Donald Trump did say prior to his election, Jim, that he will launch the biggest deportation program in U.S. history. Isn't this what the American public voted for? And what are your thoughts on how significant this raid is of the Trump administration's broader push for mass deportations?
Thomas, you're absolutely right. This is exactly what Trump campaigned upon. And he made it clear that it was really about, as he said many times, he wanted to carry out the largest removal of undocumented people since the Eisenhower administration during the 1950s. And so, sadly, this is what many Americans did vote for. And now I think a lot of people are seeing the reality of this. But what this is doing is, again, just like Trump's damage to America's reputation and America's standing in the international community, what Trump's foolish actions are doing is at least twofold. On the one hand, it's destroying the economy in California and other places because the United States economy is dependent upon workers, many of whom are undocumented, to pick fruit and to do agricultural work. And now these people are afraid, reasonably so, to show up for work. But the second reason is that Trump is destroying the rule of law and violating the Constitution, specifically the Fourth Amendment and the requirement, or the prohibition against unreasonable search and seizure. And so what Stephen Miller's policies are doing is just going after people in an indiscriminate manner, looking for anybody who looks non-white. And in the process, they're arresting not only those who are undocumented, but also U.S. green card holders and U.S. citizens themselves. There's an individual, a U.S. veteran who was wounded in action. He's now missing. He's in ICE custody. Nobody knows where he is. And so I've been following this story and can't get the answers to this.
Jim, just
Yep.
just one final question on this story. Do you think the United States has changed its perception on the world stage thanks to the Trump administration in regards to these deportations that have been taking place? What are your thoughts of America's image now when it comes to acceptance of migrants and people who come into the country?
Again, thanks for that follow-up. I really appreciate it. It's done irreparable damage, in my opinion. I'm an American. My family is from the United States, but I've lived abroad for much of my life. My wife is from here in the Philippines, and I can tell you that I'm not going to go with my wife back to the United States while Trump is still in power. I believe that and I know to be a fact, that what Trump's policies have done is to just decimate the American tourism industry. But beyond that, he's really destroying America's reputation as what Ronald Reagan called a shining city on a hill.
Jim Rice, thank you very much for joining us on the program. We now move over to the Indo-Pacific, where Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has arrived in North Korea, according to North Korea's state media. Lavrov's visit reportedly includes a meeting between the country's foreign ministers. Lavrov flew out of the Asian capital Kuala Lumpur following the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting and arrived in Wonsan, North Korea's eastern coastal city, which is home to a recently opened resort known for its missile and naval facilities. Lavrov's visit is the latest high-level meeting between the two countries amid a dramatic upgrading of their strategic cooperation that now includes a mutual defense pact. South Korean intelligence service has said North Korea may be preparing to deploy additional troops in July or August after sending more than 10,000 soldiers to fight with Russia in the war against Ukraine. Moreover, according to reports, North Korea has agreed to dispatch 6,000 military engineers and builders for reconstruction in Russia's conflict-hit Kursk region. After the visit, Lavrov is expected to travel to China to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, which is set to take place on July the 14th and the 15th. We're now joined by Professor Rohan Gunaratne, who's an international affairs expert, joining us live from Singapore. Professor Gunaratne, thank you very much for joining us on the program, as always. We've said this is another high-level meeting between Pyongyang and Moscow. What more can you tell us about the relationship between these two countries?
Russia and North Korea has built a very close partnership of security and intelligence, defense and military cooperation. We have seen over the years, Russians have visited North Korea and the North Koreans have visited Russia. But this relationship has become a very strong one during the past 1 year, where we have seen even North Korean troops traveling to Russia and joining the Russian forces in the fight against the Ukrainian forces. This cooperation is likely to grow over time, and it will even expand beyond the existing areas of cooperation.
Professor Rohan Gunaratne, thank you very much. You are staying with us to discuss further updates today. We now move over to the Middle East, where in Saif al-Din Kamal Abdul Karim Muzalat, a Palestinian American from Tampa, Florida, was fatally beaten by Israeli settlers on Friday evening in the West Bank town of Sinjil, north of Ramallah. The 23-year-old died from his injuries after the attack, which also left several others wounded. The US State Department confirmed being aware of the incident, but declined to comment further out of respect for the victim's family. Musalat's relatives confirmed to the Washington Post that he was beaten to death by Israeli settlers. Israeli authorities said that they are investigating the incident, claiming it followed a confrontation sparked by rocks thrown at Israelis. However, the exact details surrounding Musalat's death remain unclear. This attack highlights the growing violence by Israeli settlers in the West Bank, especially amid heightened tensions since Israel's military offensive in Gaza. The UN has condemned Israel's expansion of settlements in the West Bank as illegal under international law and called for a halt to the occupation. As the death toll in Gaza surpasses 57,000, Israel faces accusations of war crimes, though it insists its actions are in self-defense. The killing of Musalat serves as a painful reminder of the ongoing conflict's toll on innocent civilians and the need for an urgent, peaceful resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian crisis. Listen in to what resident of Al-Mazra al-Shakaria village who witnessed the incident had to say.
احنا المشكلة يعني الشاب كان متصاوب وقعد 4 ساعات متصاوب، الجيش ما خلانا ندخل عنده ولا حدا خلانا ندخل انطولة، ما وصلنا الشاب اللي هو صار يعني في رمق الأخير.
We're now joined by Professor Rohan Gunaratne to discuss this in further detail. Professor Gunaratne, this settler violence in the West Bank has been increasing since the start of the Gaza war in October of 2023. What can you tell us, if a bit more details, a bit more background about who the settlers are and what their objectives are in the region?
The settlers are the Jews, most of them the right-wing settlers. And this has become one of the key points of conflict and confrontation between the Israelis and the Palestinians. I only hope that there will be a resolution to this particular aspect of the conflict. So most recently we have seen that the violence has increased, and also most recently we have seen attacks against Israeli settlers. Some of them have been brazen, and I believe that Israeli forces are now working very closely with the Palestinian Security Authority in West Bank to contain that violence. So it is in the interest of all parties, the Palestinians, the Israelis, and the Palestinian Authority to ensure that there is no escalation, because Israel is already fighting a war in Gaza. So what is important is that these settlements are constrained, the activities of these settlers are very well regulated so that West Bank will also not descend to chaos.
Professor Gunaratne, there's accusations to the Israeli government that they actually support these settlers, that they're not doing enough to prevent this violence from happening. As we've said, the UN sees these settlements as illegal under international law. What do you think Israel's action should be, especially now an American citizen has been killed here? We've seen violence over the past few weeks. We've seen children killed in the past few weeks by these settlers. Is the IDF doing enough to control them?
IDF should regulate the settlers, because an escalation in West Bank will lead IDF to move its troops from Gaza and from Israel to West Bank, and that will make it very difficult for the IDF to secure the release of its hostages from Gaza. So also the international community is very concerned about the settlements of the Jews in West Bank. And I personally believe that it is an issue Israeli government should address so that eventually there will be a movement towards peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Professor Rohan Gunaratne, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Well, that is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you for joining us.